"Daddy, don't drink tea from that cup. The new mommy put poison in it." The father was shocked by his daughter's words and decided to swap the cups. The winter air was biting cold as Joshua Mitchell stepped out of his office building. In the gray cloud of his breath were sad thoughts he tried not to show. The soft glow of streetlights illuminated his path to the parked car. The snow crunched beneath his feet, and every movement in this winter landscape reminded him that it had been 4 years since his life changed forever. In the car, Joshua pulled out his cell phone and dialed Miss Rich, his daughter Stacy's nanny. The thin yet expressive sound of ringing was interrupted by her calm voice. "Good evening, Mr. Mitchell," she said. "Good evening, Miss Rich. How is my little girl?" Joshua asked with a slight smile. In response, joyful shouts and laughter from his daughter came through the line. Like magic, that voice was able to momentarily dispel the darkness that enveloped his soul. "I'll be home soon," Joshua replied, ending the call. On his way home, he stopped at a flower shop. Uncharacteristically for him, he chose a bouquet of crimson roses, each one arranged with special care. These flowers symbolized that the memory of his wife, Eva, would always be with him. When he arrived at the cemetery, his heart raced. The sky was gray, and the wind howled as if bidding farewell to those who had passed. Joshua slowly made his way to Eva's grave, who had died during childbirth. He couldn't shake the constant feeling of guilt. Her name was inscribed on the cold stone, and next to the inscription lay a fresh bouquet he had placed. "I miss you so much, my love," he said through tears. "And Stacy needs her mom. I constantly blame myself for not being able to prevent all of this." His voice was almost a whisper, and each phrase sounded like an unfinished regret. He stood at the grave, as if seeking solace in those stony words, but finding only emptiness. After spending some time at the cemetery, Joshua headed home. As he opened the door, Stacy rushed to him with a joyful cry. "Daddy's home," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him, unable to contain her happiness. Joshua lifted her into his arms and spun her around in the air, just as he used to do with her mother. His gaze filled with tears of both joy and pain. "How are you, my princess?" he asked with a smile. "Great. Miss Rich and I built a castle out of blocks," she replied, taking his hand and pulling him into the playroom. In the playroom, where the walls were adorned with colorful drawings, Stacy proudly showed off her castle. Joshua knelt to take a look, and his heart warmed. That evening, they spent time together, playing and talking. For dinner, they had baked chicken and salad prepared by Miss Rich. After dinner, Joshua read to Stacy before bed. The little girl quickly fell asleep, and he, holding her close, ran his fingers through her hair and softly said, "Mommy loves you, sweetie." The night was torturous for Joshua. He lay in bed, unable to sleep, his thoughts drifting back to the past. Every moment they had spent together with Eva felt so vivid, as if it were yesterday. He recalled her laughter, her touch, and how she cared for both of them. Morning began as usual. Joshua Mitchell woke up early, even before dawn, as was his tradition. He needed time to prepare for the new day, and while Stacy slept, he enjoyed a cup of hot coffee at the kitchen table. His thoughts wandered between the previous evening and the upcoming work meeting. The coffee tasted as warm and comforting as the memories of pleasant evenings spent with Eva. He left the house, grabbing his bag of documents, and stopped by his car on the way to the office. Looking at the gray skies, he remembered how similar days in the past hadn't bothered him much. Now, every morning was filled with anticipation and anxiety. When Joshua entered the office, he was greeted by his secretary, Miss Stark. The woman in a tailored suit with neatly styled hair looked as stylish and professional as ever. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell," she said, smiling. "Good morning, Miss Stark," Joshua replied, looking at her. "How are you today?" "Everything's fine, thank you. Just a reminder that you have a meeting with the partners at noon. I've prepared all the documents and emailed them to you," she said, handing him a folder of papers. "Thank you," Joshua replied briefly, taking the documents. He entered his office and began reviewing the materials. The documents were neatly packaged, but Joshua's focus was not solely on the numbers and proposals. He was contemplating how to negotiate a favorable deal for his company. At the appointed time, he headed to the law firm to meet with his attorney, Mr. Hartley. The office was located in the city center, and despite having been there often, he always felt a sense of nervousness before the meeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mitchell," greeted his attorney, extending his hand. "How are you?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Hartley." "I'm doing well, thank you." "I hope you are too," Joshua replied, shaking his hand. "Yes, all is well. Please, have a seat." "Let's discuss your case," Hartley said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. "I've reviewed the proposals from your partners. Let's start with the key points." They sat down at the table, and Hartley began going over the details of the proposal. Joshua listened intently, paying close attention to every word. "As you can see, Mr. Mitchell, the partners are proposing an increase in percentages. They believe this will strengthen the collaboration," Hartley explained, indicating a chart in the documents. "But I think your proposal is already fair and beneficial. An increase in percentages would lead to greater risks and costs." "I agree," Joshua nodded. "But I want the deal to be advantageous for both sides. We can't afford significant losses in the current climate. Do you think it's worth suggesting another compromise? Perhaps you could offer them a small bonus or additional terms for long-term collaboration to offset the percentage increase. But keep in mind that every step requires careful consideration," Hartley said, leaning over the documents. "And most importantly, you'll need to justify your proposal effectively." Joshua pondered the possible options. Suddenly, the office door opened, and the attorney's assistant entered with additional documents. "Sorry to interrupt, but there are a few more details we need to discuss," she said, handing the files to Hartley. "Thank you," Hartley replied, flipping through the papers. While the attorney continued to analyze the documents, Joshua thought about the upcoming meeting. He needed to convince the partners of the proposal's merits, and every word, every sentence mattered. Confidence and precision were essential. "What do you think, Mr. Hartley? Would it be wise to offer them something extra, like a bonus, to get them to agree to our terms?" Joshua asked. "Yes, that could work," Hartley replied, taking notes. Joshua nodded, weighing the idea. He understood that every step had to be thought through carefully to not miss the chance for a successful deal. "Great. If everything is set, I can demonstrate to them that our proposal is fair and beneficial," he said, rising from the table. "All right. I'll prepare all the necessary documents and make the adjustments," Hartley assured him. "You'll handle this, I'm confident." As Joshua left the office, he felt a sense of relief. The confidence that he was preparing as best as he could gave him strength. He knew he faced a challenging day, but now he had more clarity on how to negotiate. Back at the office, Joshua immersed himself in work, preparing for the upcoming meeting. He discussed the proposal details with colleagues and readied his presentation. Time flew, and the tension mounted. Lunchtime arrived, and Joshua headed to the restaurant where the meeting with the partners was to take place. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was known for its coziness and impeccable service. Inside, light background music played, creating a relaxing atmosphere. Joshua noticed that the partners had already arrived and occupied a table in the corner of the room. Mr. Thompson, with whom he was going to discuss the terms of the deal, was seated at the table, and beside him was his assistant, Lillian. As Joshua approached the table, Mr. Thompson stood and extended his hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Mitchell. It's good to see you. I hope we can have a constructive discussion about our proposal." "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," Joshua replied, shaking his hand. "Thank you for making time. I hope our proposal will be satisfactory." They sat at the table, and Joshua noticed that Lillian, a 25-year-old woman with long dark hair and expressive eyes, was staring at him intently. It was a bit unsettling, but Joshua tried to ignore it. Soon, the waiter brought the menu, and despite the setting, the conversation returned to business. I've reviewed your proposal, and overall, I like it, Mr. Thompson said, studying the documents Joshua had brought. However, I would like to discuss the possibility of increasing the percentage. This is critical for us. Mr. Thompson, Joshua began, trying to remain calm. I understand your desire, but I cannot agree to such an increase. We need to cover the company's costs while still making at least a small profit. Our proposal is already quite advantageous. Lillian, sitting next to him, continued to watch Joshua closely, her gaze focused and scrutinizing. She was clearly waiting for the conversation to continue. I understand your point of view, Mr. Thompson replied, not looking up from the document. But I don't want you to rush to conclusions. I need time to think it all through properly. All right, Joshua nodded. You have a week. I'm confident you'll find the optimal solution. If my proposal doesn't work for you, I'll have to present it to other potential partners. Mr. Thompson smiled, and there was a hint of cunning in his smile. I'm sure we can find common ground, he said. I'll try to get in touch with you as soon as possible. As they began to say goodbye, Lillian stood up, and when Joshua approached the exit, she walked over to him. With a light gesture, she handed him her business card. Mr. Mitchell, if you need any additional consultations or assistance, feel free to reach out, she said with a soft smile. Thank you, Lillian, Joshua replied, taking the card. I'll keep that in mind. He felt her gaze linger on him a little longer than usual, but he tried not to dwell on it and headed for the exit. He sensed that the meeting hadn't gone as he had hoped, but perhaps this was just the first stage of negotiations. When Joshua returned to his office, he couldn't shake the thought of the business card. Lillian left him with a sense of uncertainty. Since he preferred not to focus on it, he turned his attention to preparing the next steps. Later that evening, when the office was empty, Joshua reviewed the documents once more and thought about the proposal. Time was short, and he needed to act quickly. Perhaps they could reach an agreement, but he had to prepare thoroughly for the next meeting. His thoughts drifted back to Lillian and her gaze. She had been professional and polite, but something about her behavior unsettled him. Could it be a signal of something more? He tried to push those thoughts aside and concentrate on his main goal. Joshua Mitchell arrived home late that evening. The clock showed almost 11, and after a busy day, his body felt fatigued. He took off his coat, hung it up, and headed to the kitchen. The smell of dinner that Miss Rich had prepared still lingered in the air. However, Joshua wasn't in the mood for food. He just wanted to relax and have a bit of whiskey. With a nostalgic sigh, he poured himself a full glass and, settling down at the table, turned on the television. The evening news couldn't distract him from the worries and tension surrounding the negotiations. As he reached for the remote, his hand brushed against Lillian's business card that she had given him at the meeting. For a moment, Joshua froze, staring at her name printed on the card. He took a breath and, without much thought, decided to call her. First came a ring, then he heard her voice. Good evening, Lillian. This is Joshua Mitchell. I apologize for bothering you at such a late hour, but I wanted to talk with you. There was a light laugh on the line. Joshua, good evening. I recognized your voice. Don't worry, it's not too late. How can I help you? I wanted to see how your day went, he replied, trying to keep his tone casual. Oh, it was busy, Lillian said. But Mr. Thompson is going on a business trip for a few days, so it'll be a bit easier. How about you? Quite tense, Joshua admitted. A lot of paperwork and preparing for possible next steps. Nevertheless, I'd like to spend tomorrow evening in a more pleasant setting. May I invite you to dinner at a restaurant? That sounds wonderful, Lillian responded, her voice warming with enthusiasm. I'm in. Where and when? Let me think for a moment, Joshua said, glancing at the list of restaurants on his phone. How about Villa La Rosa at 8? It's known for its coziness and great atmosphere. That sounds perfect. I'll be there, Lillian replied, and there was a note of joy in her voice. I look forward to your message with the address and time. Of course. I'll send you the details. Thank you for your time, Lillian. Good night. Good night to you too, Joshua, she said as they hung up. When Joshua disconnected, he felt his heart race. He finished his whiskey and headed to bed. His thoughts were occupied with the upcoming meeting and how he could spend the evening with Lillian. The morning started with cheerful chaos. Joshua was still asleep when his little daughter, Stacy, burst into his bedroom. She bounced on the bed, radiating energy and joy. "Daddy, it's time to wake up," she shouted, hugging him. Joshua, rubbing his eyes sleepily, replied, "Good morning, princess," and embraced her back, kissing the top of her head. "What made you wake up so early?" "The nanny promised we'd go for a picnic in the park today," Stacy exclaimed excitedly, jumping on the bed. "I can't wait." "Well then, since you're so eager, let's start the day with breakfast." Joshua stood up and stretched, feeling his body wake up. "We both want to enjoy this day." After a quick breakfast, Stacy and her nanny, Miss Rich, headed to the park with a bag of sandwiches and a picnic basket. Although Joshua was glad his daughter would spend the day outdoors, he went to the office to finish some important tasks. In his office, despite the usual work atmosphere, Joshua's mind was occupied with anything but documents. He sat at his desk, reviewing a stack of papers, but all his attention was focused on the upcoming dinner with Lillian. He couldn't shake off the excitement and anticipation, and at one point decided to make a small gesture of attention. He sent her a bouquet of flowers via courier, hoping it would brighten her day. When the flowers arrived at Lillian's office, she immediately sent Joshua a message, "The flowers are beautiful. Thank you." Seeing her reply made Joshua's mood instantly lift. He smiled and returned to work when, unexpectedly, Nicholas, his best friend and head of marketing, walked into his office. "Oh, I see someone's life is starting to change." Nicholas grinned, noticing the happy expression on Joshua's face. "Flowers are a new touch. How do you know all this?" Joshua asked, getting up from his desk. "How did you notice I sent flowers?" "Buddy, I know you," Nicholas laughed. "So, who's this mysterious lady?" "Lillian. She works as Mr. Thompson's assistant," Joshua explained, unable to hide his smile. "Aha, so she's not one of us?" Nicholas asked, squinting and grinning conspiratorially. "I thought we had new hires I didn't know about." "No, it's not like that," Joshua replied. "We just met at a business meeting, and that's all." "You don't seem like you're just getting to know each other," Nicholas noted, winking. "Have you invited her anywhere yet?" "Yes, we have dinner planned for tonight," Joshua confessed, not hiding his excitement. "I hope it goes well." "Well, of course, you'll tell me all the details," Nicholas said, giving Joshua a pat on the shoulder. "I promise I will," Joshua laughed. "Now I need to focus on work." Once Nicholas left, Joshua continued working, but his thoughts returned to Lillian. As lunchtime approached, he couldn't help but check his phone again. There were several messages from colleagues, but the most important one was from Lillian, thanking him for the flowers. The time until dinner seemed endless. Joshua was so caught up in his thoughts that he barely noticed the workday fly by. Every time he glanced at the clock, his impatience grew. No matter how hard he tried to concentrate, his mind kept drifting back to the upcoming meeting. When the workday finally ended, Joshua went home to prepare for dinner. He took a shower, chose one of his best suits, and got himself ready. With each passing minute, he grew more and more excited. The time remaining until their meeting felt like it was stretching on forever. After getting ready, Joshua decided to check the restaurant details one last time and confirmed that everything was on track. It all had to be perfect. With that thought, he left his house and headed to Villa La Rosa, where he was set to meet Lillian. When Joshua arrived at the restaurant, he noticed he had arrived a bit early. This gave him a chance to calm down and check his reflection in the entrance mirror. He tried not to think about how everything would go, but couldn't help feeling nervous and anticipatory. When Lillian walked into the restaurant, her entrance caught everyone's attention. She was wearing an elegant black dress that highlighted her refined beauty. Joshua stood to greet her, and when he saw her smile, he felt his heart race. "Lillian, you look amazing," Joshua said, kissing her hand as a greeting. "Thank you, Joshua," she replied, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I'm glad we could meet. You look very elegant as well." They sat at the table and began to look over the menu. Joshua ordered a bottle of wine and then suggested, "How about starting the evening with something light? I think it's the perfect way to relax and chat." "Great idea," Lillian agreed. "Let's start with something unusual. I love trying new things." Throughout the evening, they talked about everything under the sun. Lillian shared her hobbies, love for art, and travel experiences. Joshua, in turn, shared impressions from his recent trips and interesting stories from his life. He especially enjoyed talking about his daughter, Stacy. "Stacy is my little joy," Joshua said when the conversation turned to his family. "She always finds a way to lift my spirits. We often go to the park or have picnics. She loves spending time outdoors." "She must be very sweet," Lillian remarked, her eyes filled with warmth. "I've always wanted to be a mom. It must be incredibly rewarding to see your child grow and develop." Joshua, a bit embarrassed yet touched by her words, continued, "Yes, it truly is a happiness. But it hasn't always been easy. Stacy and I have gone through a lot since her mom passed away. I've tried to be her support and rock." Lillian placed her hand on his, her touch soft and comforting. "Oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that," she said with genuine compassion. "I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for both of you. But you're doing wonderfully, and it shows." Joshua felt his heart lighten a little from her words. Lillian's gaze was full of understanding and empathy, and it brought him a special sense of comfort. "Thank you," he replied, a bit haltingly. "It means a lot to me to hear that. I really try for Stacy." As the evening went on, their conversation grew more intimate. They discussed their dreams, fears, and hopes. Lillian shared her own experiences and how important it was for her to find time for herself. "Sometimes I feel like life is so hectic that I get lost," she admitted. "But when I find a moment to rest, everything falls into place." Joshua nodded, sharing her feelings. "I know what you mean. Sometimes I just need to stop and enjoy the moment. Evenings like this help me recharge and get some positivity back." After dinner, Joshua offered to drive Lillian home. They walked out of the restaurant, and he noticed how fresh and cool the night air was. The drive to Lillian's house became yet another opportunity for conversation. "I just want to say that this evening has been special for me," Joshua said when they arrived at her home. "I really enjoyed spending time with you." Lillian looked at him, her eyes sparkling in the warm light of the street lamps. "I enjoyed it too, Joshua," she replied, her voice full of softness. "I felt so comfortable in your company." As they said goodbye, Joshua leaned in slowly and, unable to resist, gently kissed her. Lillian returned the kiss, and that moment felt like eternity. They stood embracing, and Joshua felt his heart race even faster. "Good night, Lillian," he said as they stepped back from each other. "Good night, Joshua," she replied with a smile before disappearing into the darkness. Joshua watched her go, feeling his heart overflow with emotions. He couldn't believe how quickly this girl had captured his affection and stolen his heart. With that feeling, he headed back home, already looking forward to their next evening and the continuation of their connection. Joshua woke up early in the morning, despite the emotional whirlwind of the previous evening. Stacy was, as always, the first to wake him up. "Dad, wake up." Her voice stirred Joshua, who opened his eyes to see her smiling face. "Are we going to the park again today?" "Good morning, Princess," Joshua said, sitting up and hugging her. "Yes, we're going to the park. But first, we need to have breakfast." Stacy joyfully bounced around the room while Joshua prepared breakfast. Time spent with his daughter always brought him joy and peace. Today was a special day, and he felt that something important awaited him. After breakfast, as they got ready, Joshua pulled out Lillian's business card from his pocket, which had her work email on it. He decided to write her a short message to check in on how her day was going. "Hi, Lillian," he began the message. "How was your day? Hope all is well." A reply came through in a few minutes. "Hi, Joshua. My day has been quite challenging, but everything is great. How about you?" Joshua didn't hesitate to respond. "Stacy and I are heading to the park." Lillian quickly replied, "Sounds wonderful. Have a great time." By midday, Joshua and Stacy arrived at the park. It was beautiful, filled with greenery and flowers, perfect for a stroll. Stacy quickly got engrossed in playing, and Joshua used this time to think about Lillian. By evening, Joshua and his daughter returned home. Stacy was full of excitement from the day spent with Joshua and quickly fell asleep. Several weeks had passed since Joshua and Lillian spent their first evening together. Their relationship was developing rapidly and excitingly. Each day brought new emotions and events, and Joshua and Lillian found more time to enjoy each other's company. One day after work, Joshua and Lillian met at a cozy little restaurant they had yet to visit. It was known for its unique menu and inviting atmosphere. "Hi, Joshua." Lillian approached the table where he was already waiting. She was dressed in an elegant dress that highlighted her grace. "Sorry I'm late, there was a bit of traffic." "No worries," Joshua replied, standing up to kiss her. "I'm glad to see you. How was your day?" "I spent the whole day at work, but this evening is definitely worth the wait," Lillian said as she sat down at the table. "I have some news I want to share with you." "Oh, what news?" Joshua asked as he poured wine into their glasses. "Today I was offered the chance to work on something more interesting," Lillian said with a joyful smile. "I'll be involved in more important projects now." "That's wonderful," Joshua said, hugging her. "You deserve it. I'm proud of you." Their conversation quickly shifted to future plans, and they decided to visit a contemporary art exhibition opening the following week. Joshua noticed how Lillian lit up when discussing art and how much she enjoyed delving into the details. "Tell me, Joshua," Lillian asked as they savored dessert, "have you ever thought about doing something other than work?" "Yes, I've thought about it," Joshua replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes I crave something new and fresh. But for now, my job takes up most of my life. How about you?" "I've always dreamed of having my own little cafe," Lillian said, her eyes sparkling with the dream. "I think it would be amazing to work in a place that creates coziness and joy for people." "That sounds wonderful," Joshua said. "And I'm sure you'd make it happen. You're always so energetic and full of ideas." Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to deepen. They often organized romantic evenings, went to the movies, and visited exhibitions. One evening, they attended an art show where Lillian was thrilled by the artworks. "Look at this painting, Joshua," she said, pointing to a vibrant canvas. "It's simply mesmerizing. I feel like every brushstroke tells its own story." "Yes, I see that," Joshua replied, studying the painting. "I love how you see in art what I might overlook. I think it's partly because I've always tried to find depth in everything I do," Lillian said, her gaze warm. "It helps me understand people better." "You really have a knack for looking deeper," Joshua remarked. "And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy spending time with you." The following week, Joshua and Lillian met again for dinner at a new restaurant. They discussed their plans for the weekend and decided to spend time at Joshua's country house. "How does that sound?" Joshua asked as they dined. "I think it would be a great place to relax and unwind." "That sounds amazing," Lillian replied. "I've always dreamed of spending time in nature. It's a great idea." When they arrived at the country house, Lillian was enchanted by its coziness and beauty. "Joshua, this is simply wonderful," she said as she walked around the yard. "It's so quiet and peaceful here." "I'm glad you like it," Joshua said, hugging her. "This place helps me relax and forget about work." In the evening, sitting by the fireplace with cups of tea, they discussed everything that was on their minds and shared their innermost thoughts. Lillian began to share stories from her childhood and how she dreamed of a bright future. "My parents always supported me in everything I started," Lillian said. "They were my main inspirations." "What was your childhood like?" "I grew up in a small family," Joshua replied. "My parents were very involved as well. But I always felt like I needed to strive for more to make them proud." "That's wonderful," Lillian said. "I love how you talk about your family. It shows how much you value relationships and loved ones." They spent several days at the country house, enjoying the tranquility and relaxation. The time spent together only strengthened their feelings for one another. By the end of the weekend, as they returned to the city, Joshua felt their bond growing stronger. The next time they met, Joshua and Lillian discussed upcoming plans and dreams. Joshua suggested, "Maybe we should think about introducing you to my daughter." Lillian's eyes sparkled with joy, and she replied, "That's a great idea. I love thinking about the future together. Let's figure out what we can do." Their plans continued to develop, and each day brought them more joy and satisfaction. Joshua was confident that their relationship was just beginning to blossom, and he was ready to move into a future full of new opportunities and happiness with Lillian. The morning began as always, with a caring wake-up and morning coffee. Joshua and Lillian sat at the table in her apartment, discussing the day's plans. Lillian smiled as she arranged the cups and plates, preparing breakfast. "Josh, do you remember that I have a meeting with my boss today?" she gently asked, trying not to get distracted while making coffee. "Of course, dear," Joshua replied, hugging her from behind and kissing her neck. "You look wonderful." "Thanks," Lillian laughed. "I'm a little nervous. It's an important meeting." "Don't worry, everything will be fine." "You've prepared really well," Joshua said, pouring coffee into their cups. "Anyway, I'm with you." After breakfast, Joshua drove Lillian to the office, and they spent a few minutes talking about their plans for the evening. "I'm free after work today," Joshua said. "We can have dinner at that new place you mentioned." "Sounds great," Lillian replied, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "I can't wait." When Lillian entered the office, Joshua headed to his work to prepare for his meeting with Mr. Thompson. On his desk were the final documents that needed to be reviewed. He was carefully going through them when his assistant, Rachel, walked in. "Joshua, are you ready for the meeting?" she asked, peeking into his office. "Yes, Rachel, I'm all set," Joshua replied, closing the folder. "I think it should go smoothly." "Don't worry," Rachel said. "I'm sure it will be excellent." At the appointed time, Joshua made his way to Mr. Thompson's office. On the way, he reflected on how important it was to wrap up this project to free up time for Lillian. Inside, he was filled with determination. When Joshua entered Mr. Thompson's office, he saw him sitting at the desk, reviewing documents. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," Joshua began, extending his hand. "I'm ready to discuss." "Good afternoon, Mr. Mitchell," Mr. Thompson replied, shaking Joshua's hand. "Let's get down to business." They sat at the table, and Joshua opened the folder with the documents. Mr. Thompson read the terms carefully and looked at Joshua. "All right, Mr. Mitchell, I agree to your terms," Mr. Thompson said, signing the documents. "Everything looks professional." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Joshua said, feeling a wave of relief. "This is an important step for us." As Joshua, satisfied with the meeting's results, started to gather his things, he noticed that Lillian had entered the office. She was accompanied by her colleague. "Hi," Lillian said, approaching Joshua. "How did the meeting go?" "Everything went great," Joshua replied, smiling. "We came to an agreement. This is an important step for us." "That's wonderful," she said, her smile impossible to miss. "I'm glad everything went so well." "Yes, me too," Joshua said, noticing his heart racing. "Shall we celebrate this evening?" "I'd love to," Lillian said, her eyes sparkling with joy. I can't wait to spend time with you." After Lillian said goodbye to Joshua, they went their separate ways. Joshua was filled with positive emotions from the successful outcome of the meeting, and the anticipation of the evening with Lillian added to his excitement. Back home, Joshua was deep in thought about how to spend the evening. He called Lillian to confirm their plans. "Hi, Joshua," Lillian answered the call. "Are you home yet?" "Hi, yes, I just got back," Joshua said. "How was your day?" "Everything's good," she replied. "Can we meet at 7 p.m.? "Yes, perfect." "I'll be ready," Joshua said, unable to hide his excitement. "Great," Lillian said. "See you soon." In the evening, when they met at the restaurant, Joshua was happy to see Lillian. He was ready to celebrate the successful negotiations and enjoy their time together. "Hi," he said, hugging her. "You look amazing." "Thanks," Lillian replied, her eyes shining. "I'm so happy to be here with you." They spent the evening at the restaurant, discussing everything on their minds and enjoying delicious food. Every moment spent together was filled with emotions and joy, and Joshua realized that these feelings would only continue to grow. At the end of the evening, as they were saying goodbye, Lillian touched his hand, and their eyes met. Joshua felt that their connection had grown even stronger, and he eagerly anticipated what the future would hold for them together. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Lillian said, her voice warm and sincere. "Thank you," Joshua replied, gently kissing her on the lips. "It was fantastic." As Lillian disappeared into the darkness, Joshua stood on the street, feeling his heart race faster. A month had passed since Joshua and Lillian started dating. Their relationship was becoming more serious, and Joshua felt it was time to introduce Lillian to his daughter, Stacy. The thought excited him, but he knew it was an important step for their future. On Saturday afternoon, Joshua and Lillian headed to his house. Stacy was home, playing with her toys and eagerly awaiting her dad's return. As they entered, the cheerful laughter of the girl filled the house. "Daddy!" Stacy shouted, running up to Joshua. "You're back." "Hi, my princess," Joshua hugged her. "I have something important for you." Stacy noticed Lillian and curiously looked her over. "Who's this lady?" she asked, squinting her eyes with curiosity. "This is Lillian," Joshua smiled. "I wanted you two to meet." Seeing how important this first impression was for Stacy, Lillian crouched down to be at eye level with the girl. In her hands, Lillian held a large, soft doll. "Hi, Stacy," she said, extending the toy. "This is for you. I hope you like it." Stacy accepted the doll with surprise and excitement, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Thank you, Aunt Lillian," she exclaimed. "Does it talk?" "No, it doesn't talk," Lillian replied with a smile. "But it will always listen to you and your stories." "Is it going to live with us?" Stacy eagerly asked, turning to her dad. Joshua smiled gently, looking at his daughter. "Let's get to know each other first," he said. "You can show Lillian your room and your toys." Stacy happily pulled Lillian along. "Come on, I'll show you," she said, leading Lillian to her room. "I have lots of toys, and I love to play with them." Once they entered the room, Stacy began showing her toys, telling her about each one. Lillian listened attentively, engaging in the play, asking questions with genuine curiosity. "This is my favorite bear," Stacy said, holding up a stuffed animal. "I always take it with me when I go to sleep." "It's very cute," Lillian remarked. "Do you sleep with it every night?" "Yes," Stacy nodded. "And this is a car that can go super fast. Do you want me to show you?" "Yes, of course," Lillian replied, smiling. "I'd love to see it." They spent several hours in the room, playing with toys and sharing stories. Stacy showed Lillian all her favorite things, and they laughed together. After playing, they sat down for dinner. Joshua made a light meal, and the three of them were in good spirits at the table. "Dad, can Aunt Lillian cook as deliciously as you do?" Stacy asked, tasting the food. She can, Joshua replied. I'll definitely treat you to something tasty, Lillian said, raising her glass. This evening has been wonderful. After dinner, Joshua walked Lillian to the door. Before she left, Stacy pulled him aside. Daddy, she said with a hint of concern, is Lillian going to be my new mommy? Joshua hugged his daughter close. Stacy, he began gently, I know this can be a bit confusing. But Lillian and I want you to be happy. We'll spend time together many more times, and I'm sure she'll be a good friend for you. Do you like her? Stacy asked, looking puzzled at her dad. A lot, Joshua answered. Lillian is wonderful, and I think she'll be a great part of our lives. Okay, Stacy nodded, still looking uncertain. I'll try to be friends with her. That's all I can ask for, Joshua said, holding his daughter close. I'm sure everything will be fine. Lillian, standing at the door, noticed their conversation and approached them with a warm smile. Stacy, she said, I'm glad to meet you. I hope we'll have a great time together. I'm happy too, Stacy replied, her expression becoming friendlier. Can we play with toys when you come next time? Definitely, Lillian promised. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. After Lillian left, Joshua hugged his daughter and thanked her for being so open to her. He knew that getting to know a new part of the family could be challenging, but he was confident that their bond would strengthen over time. With that thought, he spent the evening hoping for a brighter future for their little family. A few weeks had passed since Lillian moved into Joshua's house. The transition hadn't been easy, but they were both working hard to make everything run smoothly. Lillian quickly adapted to her new role in the family, and her interactions with Stacy became an important and positive aspect of their lives. One Saturday, Joshua returned home after a long day at work and heard joyful laughter coming from the kids' room. He approached the door and peeked inside, seeing Lillian and Stacy playing a board game. Lillian was wearing a bright dress, and her hair was pulled up in a comfortable bun. She was genuinely enjoying her time with the girl. Daddy, look, I won. Stacy shouted happily, holding up her game piece. Way to go. Lillian praised her. You're the best player. We've been playing for an hour, Stacy noted. Lillian is really good at this. Joshua walked into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Hey, he said, smiling. You both are amazing. We just finished the game, and now we're going to read a book, Lillian replied, looking at Joshua. Sounds great, Joshua said, walking over to kiss Lillian. I can see you're having a wonderful time. Daddy, Lillian said we could go to the zoo this weekend, Stacy said eagerly, looking at Joshua. Yes, that's true, Lillian confirmed. We wanted to spend some time outdoors. That sounds wonderful, Joshua said, hugging Lillian. I admire you, Lillian. You've really connected with my daughter. I can see how happy she is when you spend time together. Lillian blushed slightly and smiled. Thank you, Joshua, she said softly. It's very important to me that Stacy is happy. I also feel like a part of your family. In the evening, after Stacy had fallen asleep, Joshua and Lillian sat in the kitchen for dinner. Lillian had prepared a delicious meal and served it to Joshua with a proud smile. I put a lot of effort into this, she said, placing the plate in front of him. I hope you like it. It looks great, Joshua said, trying the food. And it tastes wonderful too. I'm glad you think so, Lillian said with a smile. I'm trying to make everything comfortable and joyful for us. You're doing an excellent job, Joshua praised her. It makes me happy to see how you care for us. It gives me confidence that we made the right choice. We're doing this together, Lillian replied. That's very important to me. Yes, that's true, Joshua agreed, continuing to eat. After dinner, they sat in the living room discussing their plans for the weekend. Joshua felt that his life had become richer and happier since Lillian's arrival. Their shared time, attention to detail, and desire to create a cozy home had become important aspects of their relationship. "What do you think?" Joshua started. "What else do we need to create the perfect atmosphere in the house?" "I think we already have everything we need," Lillian answered. "But maybe we should add more family traditions to make our weekends even more special." "Good idea," Joshua agreed. "We could start with something simple, like having movie nights every week or hosting family dinners on the weekends." "I love that idea," Lillian said. "It'll be a great opportunity to spend time together and create new memories." After a few weeks of living together, Joshua and Lillian felt their relationship growing stronger. They were creating their own traditions, planning for the future, and enjoying every moment together. Joshua was grateful that Lillian had become a part of his life, bringing joy and harmony with her. Months passed, and their lives became more fulfilling, with each day bringing joy and satisfaction. They were increasingly sure that they had found each other. Their evening walks, shared dinners, and celebrations strengthened their bond. One Friday evening, Joshua decided it was time to take the next step in their relationship. He planned to propose, which would change their lives. For this, he chose a special place, a cozy restaurant with a stunning view of the city. Lillian had no idea about Joshua's plans. She thought it was just another evening out at a restaurant. However, Joshua wanted to make this moment special. He picked the most beautiful table overlooking the city, ordered her favorite dish, and insisted that the evening be as romantic as possible. When they arrived at the restaurant, Lillian was enchanted by the atmosphere. Surrounded by candlelight and the soft glow of the lamps, she felt like she was in a fairy tale. "This place is amazing, Joshua," Lillian exclaimed as they entered. "You really went all out." "I wanted this evening to be special," Joshua replied, taking her hand and leading her to a table by the window. "You deserve something truly beautiful." They sat down and began discussing their plans for the weekend when the waiter brought a bottle of wine and beautifully presented menus. Joshua looked for the right moment to raise a toast. "Lillian," he said, looking into her eyes, "I want to raise a glass to us and to the fact that we found each other. To our love and our future." "To us," Lillian replied, lifting her glass. "You make my life incredible." After dinner, as they enjoyed dessert and coffee, Joshua felt that the moment had come. He stood up and approached Lillian, holding a small velvet box in his hands. "Lillian," he began, "in all the time we've spent together, I've learned how much you mean to me. You've brought so much joy and happiness into my life that I can't imagine my life without you." Lillian looked at Joshua in surprise, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "Joshua, are you serious?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement. Joshua opened the box to reveal a beautiful diamond ring. "Lillian," he continued, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want you to be my wife. Will you accept this proposal and be with me always?" Lillian froze in astonishment, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't find the words to express her feelings. "Joshua, this is just incredible," she murmured, unable to believe her eyes. "So, what do you say?" Joshua gently asked, hoping for her response. Yes, I accept," Lillian exclaimed, reaching out her hand to accept the ring. Joshua carefully slipped the ring onto Lillian's finger, and they embraced. In that moment, everything around them faded away. All they needed was to be together. "I'm so happy, Joshua," Lillian said, hugging him. "This is the best proposal I could have imagined." "I'm happy too," Joshua replied, kissing her. "I wanted this moment to be perfect, and I'm glad it turned out that way." After leaving the restaurant, Joshua suggested a walk along the waterfront to celebrate their engagement. Under the evening sky, illuminated by the city lights, they walked hand in hand, savoring the moment. "We should tell Stacy," Lillian suggested. "I'm sure she'll be excited to hear the news." "Of course," Joshua agreed. "I want her to know about this too. It will be an important moment for our whole family." When they returned home, they gathered with Stacy to share the news of their engagement. As expected, Stacy was thrilled. "Daddy, Lillian," she exclaimed with joy, "this is so great. I've always dreamed of having a mom, and now it's true." "We're happy too," Joshua said, hugging his daughter. "I hope this makes our family even happier." Lillian hugged Stacy and promised they would have many joyful moments together. They started planning the wedding, choosing a date and discussing the details. It was a time of anticipation, but also a time to prepare for a new life filled with hope and happiness. The wedding planning process turned out to be more exciting than expected. Joshua and Lillian chose the wedding dress, invitations, and decorations together. Each day, they delved deeper into the planning, giving special significance to every aspect of their wedding. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Joshua and Lillian chose a cozy countryside hotel for the ceremony. The whole day was filled with excitement and joy. Stacy was thrilled to be part of this day, and her smile appeared in every photo. When the ceremony began, Joshua waited at the altar in a sharp suit that fit him perfectly. He was nervous, but his eyes shone with happiness. When Lillian entered the hall in her stunning wedding dress, Joshua couldn't take his eyes off her. She looked beautiful. The ceremony was touching and full of emotion. The vows they exchanged were sincere and profound. At the moment of exchanging rings, Joshua and Lillian felt their hearts were now connected forever. When it was time to say the words husband and wife, Joshua and Lillian embraced and kissed. The guests at the wedding applauded joyfully and offered their congratulations. At that moment, it felt like the world stopped, and they could savor this unique moment. After the ceremony, a joyful reception followed with dancing and laughter. Joshua and Lillian felt that their life was just beginning. They enjoyed every moment of this special day, realizing they were stepping into a future filled with happiness. At the end of the evening, as all the guests departed, Joshua and Lillian stood by the window, gazing at the stars. "I'm so happy we have each other," Joshua said, embracing Lillian. "And I am too," she replied, kissing him. "We did this together." They looked at the night sky, realizing that their future was just beginning, ready for new adventures together. In that moment, they knew that with love and support for each other, their lives would be filled with joy and happiness. After their wonderful wedding, Joshua, Lillian, and Stacy decided to spend their honeymoon together as a family. While this choice might have seemed unusual for newlyweds, it stemmed from the fact that Stacy was very important to Joshua, and he wanted her included in their first vacation together. Lillian fully supported this decision, understanding how crucial it was for Joshua to make his daughter a part of their new life. The trip was carefully planned, and they chose a picturesque coastal destination that offered a relaxing atmosphere and plenty of activities for the whole family. When they arrived at the resort, Stacy was thrilled by what she saw. The sunlight, golden sand, and azure sea made a huge impression on her. Joshua and Lillian did everything they could to make this vacation a true celebration for her. "Daddy, look! We can build a sandcastle there," Stacy exclaimed, pointing to the beach toys nearby their room. "Yes, Princess," Joshua replied, hugging her. "We can spend the whole day at the beach. You can choose what we do. What if we play in the sand first and then go for a swim?" Stacy suggested, her eyes shining with excitement. "That sounds like a plan," Lillian agreed, taking the lead. "Let's have a sandcastle building competition first. I'm sure we can all become masters." They spent the morning at the beach, building castles and collecting seashells. Lillian and Joshua helped Stacy create a castle adorned with colorful shells and sticks. "This is a real royal castle," Lillian praised when they finished. "Thank you, Lillian," Stacy replied joyfully. "You're a true sandcastle queen." After the beach, they decided to go on a tour of the surrounding area. Joshua and Lillian chose a family tour that included a boat trip and visits to local attractions. As they boarded the boat, Stacy couldn't hide her excitement. "This feels like an adventure, just like in the books," she said, eagerly looking at the scenery. "I hope you enjoy it," Joshua said, glancing at Lillian. "This should be a great addition to our vacation." As the boat set sail, Lillian and Joshua enjoyed the views and atmosphere. They sat close together, wrapped in each other's arms, discussing how they managed to make this vacation special. I'm so glad we did this together, Lillian said, looking at Joshua. It's really wonderful. And I am too, Joshua replied, hugging her. Stacy is happy, and that's what matters. We can keep creating beautiful memories together. After the boat ride, they returned to the hotel and set up an evening picnic on the beach. Joshua prepared a basket of food, while Lillian decorated the area with candles and soft blankets. This is so romantic, Lillian remarked, gazing at the lovely setup. We should make this a tradition. Yes, that's a great idea, Joshua agreed, opening a bottle of wine and pouring drinks into glasses. It's so peaceful and cozy here. Stacy eagerly dug into dinner, and after eating, they all took a walk along the beach to enjoy the evening sunset. Daddy, I love the beach, Stacy shouted, running across the sand. This is the best place in the world. I'm glad you like it, Joshua said, walking alongside her and Lillian. We want you to remember this vacation as something special. We really are creating amazing memories, Lillian added, hugging Joshua. By evening, when it got dark, Joshua and Lillian tucked Stacy in for the night. They sat on the hotel terrace, reflecting on the day and enjoying the stars. This vacation has been simply amazing, Lillian said, looking at the night sky. I'll never forget these moments. Neither will I, Joshua agreed, taking her hand. And I hope we have many more days like this. They continued to chat under the starry sky, making every moment important and memorable. This was their first honeymoon as a family, and they were happy to share it together, creating new, precious memories. As the vacation came to an end, Joshua, Lillian, and Stacy returned home, but the feeling of happiness and satisfaction stayed with them. This honeymoon marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, full of love and shared adventures. Joshua immediately dove into work, focusing on a new project that was crucial for the company. During this time, Lillian, who had recently told Joshua about her decision to resign, also exhibited strange behavior that Joshua chose to ignore, assuming it was related to her moving and adjusting to her new life. One day, while Joshua was away for work, Stacy accidentally overheard Lillian on the phone. She hid behind the door, trying to make no sound, but her fear and anxiety began to grow. Don't worry, Lillian said, holding a small jar in her hands. I have the poison already. I'll slip it into his tea tonight, and Joshua will be disabled forever. Then we'll take over his company. Stacy couldn't believe her ears. She covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming and listened intently to every word, her heart racing. When Lillian left the kitchen, Stacy stood in shock, trying to process what she had just heard. Dad, Stacy whispered, approaching Joshua, who had just come home and was happy to see his daughter. Don't drink tea from that cup, the new mom put poison in it. Joshua was stunned by her words. He couldn't believe that Stacy could be mistaken. However, something inside him urged him to check her claim. He quickly switched the cups around, and when Lillian returned to the kitchen, she noticed nothing suspicious. I can't wait to drink this tea, Lillian remarked, pretending nothing was amiss. I hope it helps me relax after a long day. She sipped the tea slowly, watching Joshua. Soon, her face turned red, and she began to panic. I feel terrible, Lillian gasped, grabbing for air. I'm not okay. Lillian collapsed to the floor, her body shaking. Joshua quickly called for an ambulance, and when the medics arrived, they took Lillian to the hospital. Stacy clung to Joshua with trembling hands as he held her tight. Princess, how did you know the tea was poisoned? Joshua asked in confusion as they sat in the hospital. I heard her say she'd put poison in the tea to make you disabled, and then they'd take your company, Stacy replied, her voice trembling. I didn't want anything to happen to you. The next morning, Joshua visited Lillian in her hospital room. She lay in bed with a pale face, and he felt a storm of emotions inside. He looked at her with fury and disbelief. Why would you do this to me? He asked, his voice shaking with anger. How could you? Lillian began to cry. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her eyes were filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Joshua," she sobbed. "I didn't want this. It was all wrong." At that moment, Nicholas, Joshua's friend, burst into the room, his face twisted with worry and fear. "What are you doing here?" Joshua asked, his voice full of irritation. "What have you done to her?" Nicholas gulped nervously, his eyes wide with panic. "She's pregnant with my child." These words shocked Joshua. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Nicholas continued, his voice filled with despair. "Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. I was the one who suggested she stage this whole love act. You were supposed to drink the poison tea, damn it. But why? We were friends." Joshua was stunned, his hands shaking. "Why would you do this?" "Friends?" Nicholas scoffed through tears. "I loved Eva, but she chose you. I wanted to show you how it feels when your best friend takes away the woman you love. No, man. You don't love anyone. You only want money." Joshua glared at Nicholas, his voice turning cold. "I don't believe you. You just craved revenge and money." Joshua slowly walked out of the room, his thoughts a chaotic mess. He felt as if his world had collapsed. Nicholas's words about Eva, about Lillian, and about the future child that could become part of this complicated story hit him like a knife. He immediately called his lawyer to discuss divorce. His heart was closed off forever, and his emotions were shattered. When Joshua returned home, he felt that his life had changed forever. All that remained was the shadow of betrayal and the pain he had endured. Now he had to rebuild his life, facing the consequences of what had happened.